Hey everybody. All right, we're gonna get started. Just a quick housekeeping. I always forget to do this, but I wanted to remind everybody up front. If you have any questions, there's a question in a chat box on the console. So if you have any questions, feel free to type them in there. I don't always look ahead of time, but by the end of the presentation, I'm going to answer any questions you have. I think we've got about 30 minutes of material, maybe about 35 minutes of material to go through, and then after that we can spend a few minutes on just taking your questions and see if I have the answers for you. Welcome to our webinar. We're ready. I really appreciate you taking the time to join us today. We fully understand how busy your schedule is, and I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure that this webinar is worthwhile for you. I'm David Boland. I'm on our product marketing team here at Wasabi. There's a lot of folks out there who are struggling to understand cloud storage pricing models, and at first glance you would think that cloud storage should be easy to understand, but that's not always the case. I hate getting nickel and dimed, and I'm guessing that you probably do too. Usually the problem comes because I'm unaware or I've missed the small print, and that's usually where the mystery charges are hidden. The truth is that there really is no completely hidden cost. They're out there if you know where to look, how to find them, or the questions to ask. But if you do know where to look and where to find them, the questions to ask, you can minimize the the costs associated with cloud storage. It's easy to overlook some of those costs, and we can minimize that pain for you. But I still don't like the idea that sometimes people feel that they've been tricked when their bills come in higher than anticipated. Worse than the feeling of being tricked is storing your data in the cloud only to find out later that when you want to move it back on-prem or to another cloud, it's next to impossible because you've been essentially locked in. So my goal today is to remove some of the mysteries associated with cloud costs and the different vendors so that everyone can make a well-informed decision on where to put their storage and what's the best fit for their business case. So we have, like I said, a wide range of folks attending today's webinar. Most have not migrated any data to the cloud yet, or they're service providers who are in the process of migrating their customers' data to the cloud, and they want to better understand pricing models. Some folks have already moved data to the cloud and they feel like they've been burned, and so they're looking for alternatives. And some attendees are just plain curious about Wasabi and what we have to offer. Regardless of who you are and what you do, odds are that you share some of the same reasons or interests in understanding cloud costs. You don't want to be surprised by your cloud bill. You want to better understand and predict and plan for costs. You want to feel more confident that you're not locked in if you have a desire to change your cloud vendor or the direction you want to go in. So today we're going to look at the various costs of cloud storage and their impact on your bottom line. We're going to start with a quick review of on-prem storage and the advantages of moving to the cloud. We'll spend a lot of time on the hidden costs and how to talk to vendors and learn more about lock-in. We'll spend, we'll look at 5 ways in which you can reduce the risk of both hidden costs and lock-in, and then we'll wrap it up with a discussion of cloud options and why Wasabi is different from the rest. So I want to begin by answering simple questions, 2 of them actually. Who the heck is Wasabi, and why should I care? And simply put, Wasabi is the hot cloud storage company. We deliver cloud data storage on demand, 80% less expensive and faster than first-generation cloud storage services from the AWS S3, Microsoft Azure Blob, or Google Cloud's object store. Our mission is to make storing data simple, fast, affordable, and secure. It's simple because, as you'll see, and we'll talk about later, there are no complex service and pricing tiers. It's affordable because we're up to 80% less expensive than the others, and again, we'll talk about no hidden fees for data egress, API requests, or data transit charges. We're fast. Wasabi treats all data as hot data. You can keep all your data hot so it can be accessed in milliseconds instead of minutes, or in some cases hours, from other cloud vendors. And we're secure. We offer 11 nines of durability and give you the option for data immutability. We were founded in 2015 by industry visionaries and pioneers David Friend and Jeff Flowers, both of whom had previously did Carbonite. And for the past couple of years, 2018 and 2019, we were named one of CRN's top cloud vendors. So on average, data is growing about 20% yearly. And in many cases, it's actually 35 to 50%, depending on your industry. The average IT budget actually has only been growing at about 7% annually. So IT teams are being asked to manage a lot more data with less money. And cloud storage usually saves a significant amount of money and resources over in-house storage infrastructure. On-prem storage vendors like NetApp or EMC will try to prove the opposite by comparing just the initial purchase price of the hardware versus cloud costs. But this is not a true apples to apples comparison. You want to look at the fully loaded in-house storage costs, which include not only capital expenses, but ongoing operational costs, hardware refreshes every 3 to 5 years, the cost of data migration, support for licensing and contracts, and in-house IT staff. Moreover, this headache exists for each piece of storage, each device you have on-prem. There's a lot of challenges associated with on-prem storage. There's the need for specialized administrators, the long lead times for capacity expansion. There's the risk of investing too much or too little in new technologies. And there's constant changes in requirements for facilities. Operating on-prem storage consumes a lot of resources, and in many cases, that's raised floor space. It can be used for something else. We're using many pieces of infrastructure, power, cooling, network, and you're paying a lot for network attached storage, and you really don't need to. We've reached the point in the cloud maturity model where you can leverage cloud solutions and benefit from the economics that the clouds bring. So why the cloud? Again, we've heard about the cloud. We've looked at what it can do for us. We've seen some webinars. You're attending the webinar. We've downloaded some white papers. But the big question is, what's truly available out there, and what are the differences between the cloud providers? The advantages of the cloud are that there's pretty much no CapEx, right? So you move away from a CapEx model. You lower your operating expenses, no reoccurring power, cooling, or rack space. Hardware, software maintenance goes away, and you can repurpose your personnel, have them working on projects that affect the bottom line, and focus on the core of your business. You have protection from technology obsolescence, because you don't own the hardware anymore. It's the cloud vendor that owns the hardware, and you don't have to worry about obsoleting hardware technology. And in many cases, you've increased security and compliance with any data that you need to store. Now, you're asking yourself, or you're saying, David, this is nothing new. AWS S3 object storage has been around for a long time, and that's correct. But until recently, only the past few years, it's pretty much been the only game in town. The first groups of customers that were moving to the cloud, they had limited options. The standard choices were, of course, AWS, Azure, or Google Cloud Platform, and pretty much they're all the same flavor of vanilla. These early cloud storage services were complex. There are multiple storage tiers. You have your standard, your warm, your lukewarm, your cold, your wicked cold, even colder. All the tiers had different costs associated with them, different performance levels, and it made it hard to know if your data was on the right tier or even in the right cloud. If you wanted some of that data back, say 10%, 20%, or all of it, how much would it cost you? A lot of questions you couldn't answer. The challenge of understanding the actual costs of storage gets more complicated when you're comparing the pricing between cloud storage services, and that's because the cost models for cloud storage are vastly different from what you're used to for on-prem storage. and there's a lot more cost associated that you didn't see before with on-prem storage. And the pricing can vary between storage, cloud storage service provider and other cloud storage service providers. And you know what? We've all seen the headlines before. There's plenty of horror stories out there of folks that have made cloud mistakes. A quick Google search will reveal hundreds, of stories and blogs and articles by people who have learned the hard way about hidden costs. Many IT managers have had to go through the painful experience of trying to budget for cloud resources, and unfortunately, early iterations of cloud services were complex, and so was the pricing, and it made it very difficult to fully predict and budget for cloud services. And you combine that with the difficulty of accurately predicting and managing usage, the results in that many cloud services earn the reputation of having hidden costs. And the truth is that no cost is completely hidden. Like I said earlier, if you know how and where to look, you can find them, and that'll give you a better idea of the true costs associated with cloud storage. However, you still want to avoid that feeling of being tricked when those cloud bills come in. So, where do we find those cloud costs? When using cloud storage, you may not realize why or how your cloud resource dollars are disappearing so quickly, and that's because translating cloud storage statements, estimating the costs from those, are difficult at best and they're overwhelming at worst. Have you ever seen a cloud storage usage statement from Amazon? It's an Excel spreadsheet that could be millions of lines long and hard to decipher. It's really hard to manage, to wrap your mind around. First generation cloud service providers like AWS have these complex pricing models. AWS's suite of cloud products is one of the most confusing. It's enough to give CFOs and budget conscious CIOs headaches when running cost estimations or determining cost resource budgets, and of course reviewing the monthly cloud storage bill. There's a whole market of products and consultants and blog forums devoted to helping buyers make sense of confusing and unpredictable AWS monthly charges. When you peel apart the confusing monthly statement and to uncover why cloud services are so expensive, you learn quickly that it's because there are hidden fees that go beyond just the raw storage costs. And the first and most obvious is the raw storage charge. That's your monthly charge. That's a price per gigabyte that you're paying. And sometimes that's not as simple as it sounds. There's a whole complex list of storage tiers that, like I said, run from hot to warm to cold to very cold. AWS has 5 to 6 different tiers. Azure has 4 to 5 tiers. They all have different costs, different performance, and different data retention periods. We could probably do a full webinar on just deciphering the tier architecture alone. Maybe we will someday. But tiers can be a nightmare if you're not on the right one or you don't understand them fully. Next, you have your retrieval fees. The most expensive tiers may not have a retrieval fee, but the cooler you get and the more you move towards archive tiers, the more expensive it costs to get that data back. These less expensive tiers make up the cost difference by charging you 1 to 3 cents per gigabyte to get your data back. Your retrieval fee and your GET requests are not the same. Your API GET requests are charges that you can incur simply by asking for your data back. In fairness, these GET requests may not be too expensive. You're only going to get hurt if you're recovering millions of objects. But the idea of being charged just to request your data back can be annoying. Your retrieval fees, your API GET requests, they're nothing really compared to the egress charges that you face. You pay a charge of between 2 cents and 9 cents per gigabyte to get your data back. Right? So if you have a lot of data to move, let's say it's over 100 terabytes or even petabytes, it's probably in your best interest to pay for a full direct connection to AWS or to Azure, usually a couple $100 per month for a 1 gigabit per second pipe. This is going to reduce your egress costs to only a few $1,000s instead of the tens of thousands of dollars it could cost you to move hundreds of terabytes or even petabytes for free over the internet, for free, that's air quotations, for free, because it really costs you about 5 cents to 9 cents per gigabyte to move your data back across the internet. So to get your data back from the cloud, or move it between clouds, you're looking at retrieval fees, API GET requests, and egress charges. Right? If you talk to your friendly AWS or Azure sales rep, assuming you know who it is and where you can find them, I'm sure they're going to tell you that at least there's no ingress charges, meaning they're not going to charge you for uploading your data to their cloud. Yes and no. It's true, there's no ingress charge, but you are going to be charged for asking to put your data up there, right? So you better believe that they're going to charge you just for the pleasure of asking to put the data in the cloud. These charges, of course, come in the form of API put requests. You're going to be charged for asking to put your data in someone's cloud. And this is on a per object basis. It's not a per gigabyte or per terabyte or per kilobyte basis, on a per object basis. So let's talk about this. There's almost always a transaction application that sits between your on-premise data and the cloud. And this transaction software could be your backup package, your archive software, your file sharing program, media asset management, or whatever it is. But in most cases, this transaction software arranges your data into uniform size blocks before it sends it to the cloud. And these blocks can range in size from 1 megabit to 512K to 256K. As example, Veeam backup and replication users often use 512K size blocks. It makes it better performing. You can back up faster and you can get your data back faster with uniform size blocks. But this means that for every 1 terabyte of data you send to the cloud, about 2 million put requests are initiated. And as backups grow and data changes, the number of API requests increase. So we're talking about hundreds of millions of objects in the cloud generating API requests, which in turn drive up your cloud costs for AWS S3 users or Azure users. The more objects you have to put into the cloud, the more you're going to pay. So once we have our data in the cloud, you may want to do some things to it. You may want to ask for a list of all your objects. They all have names, sizes, dates, extensions. You may want to check your list of cloud objects against your list of on-prem objects to make sure that you have they're the same. So you can do some integrity checks to make sure there's been no corruption. You're not actually downloading anything, but you're just checking on it to make sure it's healthy and in the way it should be. Maybe it helps you to sleep at night knowing that there's no corruption in your data. Well, that good night's rest is going to cost you, because every time you do an inventory operation, just checking on your data, running, asking how many objects I have in this bucket or how many buckets I have, it's going to cost you on a per object basis again. So you can see how it's important to know the number of objects you have or plan to store, because it's going to affect your budget. You need to know the total amount of storage you consume. That's, of course, your monthly raw storage charge. That's the part of the iceberg that's above the water. But do you know how much data you download each month? Can you estimate how much you're going to egress? And if you can, that'll give you an idea of what your egress charges are if your vendor charges you for egress. Do you know the average size of your objects? Right? Are they 1 megabit, 512, or 256K? Does it matter? Yeah, it matters. Because what if those are 40K size objects and they're sitting on an AWS tier that has a minimum size of 128K objects? Oh, you can store objects less than 128K on AWS infrequent access or AWS infrequent access one zone, but they're going to charge you as if they're 128K. So if these objects are small, you can be paying extra money for them. It may not apply to you, but I promise you out there, somewhere out there, there's somebody who has a lot of archived email, Word docs, or JPEG thumbnails that they want to store. And if they're storing them on infrequent access or infrequent access one zone, they're paying 2 to 3 times is what they should. Needless to say, we've just touched the tip of the iceberg, and there's a lot of costs in addition to your monthly storage charges that could be hidden. Right? They're not completely hidden. You just need to know where to look and how to find them. And in most cases, they're just lurking, just under the water. So, should you be concerned about lock-in? Right? Let's shift gears a little bit here and talk about that. That's a scary term. And I use it on purpose because usually it evokes an emotion or a response. Some people, are horrified by lock-in. Some people get defensive if they think they've made the wrong choice. If you're familiar with the database lock-ins like Oracle or SAP, or making mainframe decisions back in the old days with IBM, Digital, Wang, or even making local area network decisions like Ethernet or token ring, then you know what I'm talking about. Nobody wants to be on the wrong side of technology. You don't want to be the guy that's made the decision, to be on the wrong side of technology. And your friendly sales reps at AWS or Azure, if you know them, will say that lock-in is ridiculous. That can't happen in their clouds. They built their clouds on open standards like Xen or SQL or Linux. And true, the AWS S3 storage API has emerged as the de facto standard that's supported by a wide variety of cloud providers, a wide variety of applications. Wasabi supports the S3 standard. We a simple, standards-based, RESTful API that's 100% bit compatible with S3, which means that you can freely move your data between clouds and you're not locked into a proprietary service. Now you say, David, this doesn't sound like anyone's being, effectively being held prisoner of the cloud. So where's the lock-in? All right, good question. If you find yourself in a position where you want to migrate your data back on-prem or to another cloud, but can't afford to do it because the price you have to pay is too high to get your data back, then it's fair to say that you are effectively locked in. At least it's better than saying your data is being held hostage. So let's look at this little example. In the cloud storage industry, as I mentioned, AWS, Google, Microsoft, IBM, all make it free. Free for the most part. You're still going to pay your API put charges. They make it free to upload your data into their cloud. But if you want it back, you're going to pay for every gigabyte. So in this example, on year one, you've put 100 terabytes of data into a cloud. Not bad, right? And we said 20% year-over-year growth for 5 years, 20% on the low side. Some of you guys probably have higher than that, but 20% is a good number, right? Over 5 years, that means you've grown to 207 terabytes. And now you've decided that you want to move it out of AWS or Azure for whatever reason, right? To get your data back, it's going to cost you close to $20,000. Right? That's with the API GET requests, that's with retrieval fees, and that's egress fees. Right? And there's some variables here. I'll give you that. There's how many objects, right, and your egress methods. If you choose the internet, it's going to be more expensive than than nailing up a direct connection. But for the most part, you can see where I'm getting at this. It's going to cost you thousands of dollars to get your data back from the cloud that you've been storing for 5 years. All right. The lock-in doesn't come from a proprietary or non-standard data format. It comes from the extremely high cost of retrieving your data. Your friends at AWS will say that the term lock-in is misleading, and what they're really talking about is a switching cost. Well, I say the term switching cost is misleading, and what we're really talking about is data held hostage. I don't want to pay egress charges. I know you don't. The reason why they exist is so that people won't take their data out of the cloud. So how do we avoid this? There's steps you can take to avoid, I'd say avoid excessive prices on costs, additional hidden costs, and to avoid lock-in. It's important to know your data. Right? Depending on your object count and how your applications interact with storage, activity costs may or not be a factor for you, but I promise you they are for most people. Right? At first glance, API request charges appear to be tiny, a fraction of a cent, 1 cent, or 5 cents per 1,000 operations. but they become significant when you have large object counts and transaction rates. If you have millions of objects, or hundreds of millions of objects, or billions of objects, which sounds crazy, but there are plenty of customers out there that have billions of objects. Email, event logs, IoT workloads, they all can reach hundreds of millions or billions of objects. And this is where activity costs matter. And if you're going to be charged per object to pull them out of the cloud, you're going to, in some cases, you're going to have to pay through the nose. It may sound overly negative, but it's prudent to assume that something's going to go wrong with your cloud service provider or your relationship with them, and you're going to want to break up. And when you do, you want to have a plan for it. So one of the things is to consider writing a backout or a reversibility plan. And depending on your risk level and the risk level that you perceive, you can make this plan more or less detailed. It all depends on you. In the plan, you want to itemize what the major switching costs would be if you had to leave your cloud vendor of choice, what steps you're going to take to manage those costs, and you can make that a high-level project plan. And you can make that project plan and estimate the costs that are going to be associated with it if you decide to go. Right? Keep multiple copies of your data. It makes a lot of sense. You want to keep a copy on-prem and keep a copy in the cloud. If you have to move your golden copy out of one cloud to another, it'll cost you. But if you actually have a second copy or your golden copy on-prem and you can do a full backup to your new cloud of choice, then for a short period of time, maybe it's a couple of weeks, maybe it's a month, you have 1 foot in each cloud. And once you have that backup to your new cloud established and you're satisfied with the way it looks, kill your first relationship. Right? Let that data atrophy up there and keep everything going with your new cloud. For those of you who understand the backup world, there's the best practice is 3-2-1. That's keeping 3 copies of your data, 2 of them on different platforms, and then 1 of them in a completely different location. It makes a lot of sense these days to keep those 2 backup copies, 1 in each in a different cloud. So you have your primary on-prem, and then one copy up in cloud A, another copy in cloud B. And that's really going multi-cloud route. So organizations are increasingly creating multi-cloud environments to help them maintain that ability to move freely, move your data between clouds if things don't work out the way you want them to. And if you understand the fact that you're probably paying egress charges now, or maybe you didn't know it, or you can build those into it. Moving data between clouds, at 2 cents a gigabyte may not be bad if you can anticipate those costs are coming your way. Understanding cloud storage costs is the most important, right? So knowing what you have to face each month is going to make your life a lot easier. And that's the reason why we're on the webinar today, is to help better understand these cloud storage costs, how they impact you, and the plans you have going forward. And then also understanding that not all clouds are created equal. It's as simple as that. Amazon AWS S3 is the granddaddy of all object storage. It's been around since 2006, and it generates billions, that's with a B, billions of dollars of revenue for AWS. Right? Microsoft Azure Blob is a little bit younger, 2010, and Google Cloud Object is about 2016, but they're basically cookie cutter copies of S3, and they've pretty much copied everything from performance tiers to pricing models. Right? The problem with these services, they're designed and built on architectures that were advanced back in 2006, and they really haven't improved, in the past 16 years, 2 decades, right? They haven't had a need to, right? But but times are changing. Wasabi is available. Other cloud products, Packet on the compute side, have come to market. These older cloud storage services, they have complex tiered service offerings that make just simply deciding what tier to use a project into itself. Because the differences between tiers can be subtle, your requirements can change over time. It's difficult to know whether your data is actually on the right tier or even in in the right cloud and how that affects your budget. So, you know, even using less expensive, slower tiers, like a cool tier or archive tier, it may be less expensive on a monthly storage basis, but they make up that money on those API requests and the egress charges. And it forces you to give up your ability to gain instant access to your data when you need it. You may not just want your data back, you just may need your data back. And in order to get your data back when you need it, it's a good chance you're gonna have to pay an expedited fee in order to get that data back in a reasonable amount of time. Wasabi doesn't have multiple tiers. All storage is kept hot or instantly available. We offer a single pricing plan for which we charge a flat rate of 0.0059 per gigabyte per month. In addition to having only one pricing tier, there are no hidden fees or charges with Wasabi. The other guys, you know, their cloud storage vendors will charge you if you want your data back. With AWS, like we said, it could be between 2 cents and 9 cents per gigabyte. You ask yourself this question: do you know how much data you download from the cloud? Most people don't. But the average is about 10 to 20% of what you have stored. Right? You know, what would it cost you to download 10 to 20% each month? We've talked about charges for API requests today. Let's say you want to check on your data you have stored in S3 or Azure. You want to scan that data, compare the names and sizes and dates, just perform simple checksums functions in order to make sure it's not degraded. It's going to cost you. It may look small on paper, a couple pennies here, a couple pennies there, but they'll nickel and dime you, and it's going to add up. The more the quantity of your data grows, the more you're going to end up paying. The more you want to check on, manage on it, the more it's going to cost you. There's no API charges with Wasabi. With cloud vendors that have multiple tiered architectures, you have egress fees for downloading your data, fees for API requests, fees for checking on your data while it sits there. It makes it impossible, or nearly impossible, to predict what your cloud spend is going to be. If you can't predict what your cloud spend is going to be, how can you forecast or budget for it? It just becomes a headache. So let's wrap it up, and then we'll answer some questions if you have them. We've talked about hidden costs. Hopefully, I've shown shown a light upon some of the things that are lurking just below the water. In addition to your data storage charges, some of the guys, everyone else is going to hit you with an API request charge. Basically, it's an activity fee. You get charged for putting your objects in the cloud. You get charged for checking, on your stuff in the cloud. You get charged for requesting your data back. There's a retrieval fee per gigabit. You want that? That's a retrieval fee. Oh, and you want to get an egress charge on top of that for transporting your data back to your premise or to another cloud? Well, there's another one. It's all going to add up. If your objects are small, you pay the minimum object rate. Right, so there's a couple of those tiers out there on AWS. They have a minimum tier rate of object rate of 128K. If your object's less than that, you're going to pay the 128K object size. If you put it in archive, you're going to add a couple of kilobytes to each of your objects. 32K for metadata here, 8K for metadata there, and all of a sudden, if you've got millions of objects and you just added 40K to those, what's going to cost you? It goes up. You should know that it's important to understand your data, right? Not only the total amount, but also have not only the total amount, the capacity you store, but an idea of the number of objects that you own or plan to own and what the average object size is. You should be able to estimate the amount of data you egress each month. When you don't have to estimate the amount of data you have to egress each month, well, you don't get charged for it. You don't have to worry about it then. But if you are being charged to take your data out, then you want to estimate it. All right. Wasabi doesn't have a hidden cost lurking below the surface. What you see is what you get: $5.99 per terabyte per month. Our performance is better than the others, which means that you can put your data into the cloud faster and get it back right away. And you don't have to worry about moving it to tiers, to get a better price. And keep your fingers crossed so you don't need it back in a matter of seconds, and you can actually wait for minutes or hours. And so this pretty much wraps up our presentation today. About 34 minutes, not too bad. I hope that this has been helpful. I've got some more information coming your way in future webinars. We're going to have some information available on our website if you want some information about pricing and how we compare. I know we've got a couple questions, so I just got to figure out how to get to them, and then I'll see what I can do about answering them.
I've got two.
Oh, okay. Hey, Madison. Everybody, this is Madison. Say hi.
Hello. How does Wasabi compare to Backblaze?
Okay, Backblaze is another alternative to AWS and Azure and Google. Backblaze, nothing wrong with them. There's an option. They have a good service. We don't really bump into each other too often, but I do know that I do appreciate the work that they do. I think the pricing is about the same. I think you might have a little bit of an egress charge there, but our pricing is about the same. I don't think there's any API costs, but maybe just a little bit of an egress charge. It's a good alternative. I'm not sure if they are fully S3 compatible yet. I know that they weren't in the past, and sometimes that doesn't matter, and sometimes it does. But Backblaze is a good alternative to the original, Cloud 1.0 folks out there like AWS, Azure, and Google.
And another question was, can you direct restore VMs to Amazon or Wasabi without going through on-prem?
Okay, can you direct restore VMs from Wasabi to Amazon or someplace else without going through your prem? You can. And so it requires, and we have a few customers that have a direct connect between AWS EC2 and Wasabi. So the direct connection it really is just part of a VPN. Really, direct connect, maybe 1 gigabit per second pipe that connects your EC2, your VPC from AWS to Wasabi, and allows our customers to direct either use the compute or use that as a backup for VMs. But it can be done. If you have a deep question about it, you can hit our knowledge base on our website and type that in. It can help you, or send a note to our services team, and they'll help you better understand how to directly restore a VM. But it can be done.
That's all I have right now.
All right.
Does anyone have any last questions?
Awesome. If you do, you know what? I'm going to see if I can, my email is pretty simple. It's dboland@wasabi.com. If you have any questions, fire me an email, hit me up on LinkedIn or Twitter, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Until then, if you don't have any questions, I hope to see you or hear from. Oh, we got one more. Masson has one more.
Will Wasabi have a backup solution for easy full integration instead of using software like MSP 360?
Oh, okay. Good question. So will Wasabi have its own backup solution instead of using a transactional software like MSP 360 or Veeam or Rubrik or Commvault? And the answer is I don't foresee that happening. You know what? We're focused solely on cloud storage. And you know what? Yeah, we have fantastic integrations with a lot of backup and archive software. We don't want to compete with our partners. We don't want to compete. You know what you won't see? You won't see us developing backup software. You won't see us developing our own MSP division where we go out and compete with our partners for MSP dollars. We're just focused solely on object storage. That's all we want to do. We want to be the best. We feel we're the best. And I can't foresee us creating a backup software, an archive software, MSP division, or competing with our partners or our customers. But that was a good question. I hadn't had that one before. I like that one.
That's it.
All right, you guys. I appreciate you joining. I hope you learned something. If you have any questions, fire me off an email. It's 2 hours and 2:40 now. It's 40 minutes. Not bad. All right. Usually I go long, but I'm happy with everything, and I appreciate your time. Take care.